Good day, everyone. We are thrilled that you are joining us for this edition of the SIP Shelter in Place series on the STIR podcast. I'm your host, Trish Muyco-Tobin, and right next to me is author, sitcom producer, and movie maven extraordinaire, Debbie Baldwin. Hey, Debbie.
Hey, Trish. Thanks for having me.
So do you realize this is our 15th episode of the Shelter in Place series? That means we've been at this for approximately 15 weeks. So, when we started back then, we had hoped that by this time, things would be improving. But alas, many of us are still observing social distancing guidelines, rightly so, to keep each other safe.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. I think we all thought this would be a much shorter situation than it's turned out to be. So I guess we just, keep riding it out and stay safe and be smart.
Yeah, but as you can see, it is mid-August. Some of the familiar things that you expect with this time of the year slowly coming back together. This is normally the time when students are headed back to school, and they are, although, kids are truly in a different environment, a different setting, come fall semester.
Yeah. Well, and as more and more schools they start, and then the schools are backing off of it after they get a spike. So, in the theme of going back to school and in the hope of going back to school, we've chosen some good movies, I think.
I think so. I mean, this is, to help those parents along, those who haven't quite wrapped their head around this reality. The school is back. Our must-see movie list this week, you're right, it's all about school. High school angst, extracurriculars, sports, and yes, even some hanky-panky here and there.
Yes, absolutely. And it's a good list. I'm like, as I'm looking at it, I'm realizing I left off like probably my favorite high school movie of all time. So I can't believe I have such a little brain fart coming up with this list. But I can squeeze it in as we.
Sure. I mean, this was a challenging list to put together. I mean, because when you have all those movies in front of you, you realize there have been a lot of movies centered around, the classroom, going back to school. Yeah.
I mean, it's fertile soil for drama, for comedy, for tragedy. It's, high school is a microcosm of emotion. It's everything that's going on with kids that age, and teachers and parents is, just there's a lot of drama.
And as you'll see, even though our list of movies spans decades, you'll see some similarities between the students of way back when and the students of today. So with that in mind, we're going to start with a movie from 1978. And what a movie, my goodness. In terms of funny, this brings the funny, and that is Animal House.
Animal House is at the top of my list of the funniest movies of all time. And what is there to say? It is the definitive comedy about college life. And if you're one of the 4 people on the planet who hasn't seen it, it's still as funny today as it was when it came out. John Belushi, Tim Matheson, Peter Riegert, I mean, this cast, Donald Sutherland, Karen Allen, it goes on and on, the talent.
The debut of a very young, fresh-faced Kevin Bacon.
Thank you, sir. May I have another? And it's, touches on the comedy and the sheer just insanity of fraternity life and the real kind of nitty-gritty of people just getting an education, but in other ways than in the classroom.
The search for a location for this movie is actually quite fascinating. My alma mater, the University of Missouri-Columbia, was in the running and was actually the location chosen to film this movie. Can you imagine that? I mean, for the fictional Faber College. But when the president of Mizzou at the time read the script, he withdrew. It wasn't happening at Mizzou. It was not happening at Mizzou. So after the University of Missouri declined, they then went to the University of Oregon, where the president there, William Boyd, back in the 60s, William Boyd was a senior administrator at Berkeley. And at the time, the producers of a little film called The Graduate approached Berkeley about filming there. But this William Boyd, again, who was a senior official at Berkeley, consulted with other officials at the school, and they nixed the idea because they thought that it really offered no artistic merit. Can you believe that? And now what? We're talking about The Graduate being a landmark film, you know, one of the greatest films of all time. So lesson learned, Mr. Boyd, when he was approached at University of Oregon, he was determined not to make the same mistake. So they greenlit Animal House. He even offered the use of his office to be used as Dean Warmer's office. And, you know, the rest is history.
All right. Well, that is a very interesting story. Imagine having passed on The Graduate, you'd be welcoming any other opportunity to, you know, not make that mistake again.
Yes, and he made the right choice with this movie, because again, in terms of, you know, movie making history, Animal House is right up there.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned that, you know, Belushi, out of all the young cast, really, he was the only one with name recognition from this movie. And even then, he had yet to appear on a feature film. He was known from, you know, Saturday Night Live. But really, the cast, if you think about it, relative unknowns, mostly unknown. I mean, even Kevin Bacon, during the premiere of this movie, he had to sit in the back of the theater with the masses and not with the cast in front of the theater, because the ushers did not recognize who he was, and they did not believe him when he said, "I'm with the movie."
Oh, that's so funny.
So yeah, so, you know, Animal House, you're right. I mean, it's still funny.
Yeah. I mean, every scene, you can't really single one out. I mean, from the road trip to, you know, Tim Matheson's seduction of the girl at the all-girls college, to the famous scene when they're rallying the troops and trying to,
oh my gosh,
you know, go down in a blaze of glory, with Belushi's infamous monologue about the Germans bombing Pearl Harbor. Is, you know, it's just, every scene in the movie is hilarious. And I mean, I could sit down and watch it anytime, any day, no matter what.
Well, so you must remember the cafeteria scene. And you will not be surprised that that scene was completely improvised by Belushi. When he started piling on the food, the director reportedly told the camera crew to just stay with him. And that's what happened with the scene. Even that little bit about the I'm a zit, you know? Yeah, so that was made up by Belushi, and you can see the reaction from the other actors, and that was genuine, because they didn't know he was gonna come up with that.
Those little food items and just putting them all in his mouth. Yeah, that's, you know, hilarious. And, you know, John Belushi, honestly, the guy could communicate more with one raised eyebrow than most actors given a full speech. He was a true talent.
Yeah, that's really what made him one of the great ones.
Yeah.
And so from one comedy to another, we are jumping into 1986, and we are talking about a different kind of comedy giant, and that is Rodney Dangerfield in Back to School.
Now, this movie, Rodney Dangerfield is one of those comics who you don't really know if you're willing to invest in him for an entire movie to helmet. He's so brilliant in Caddyshack and in his like other smaller roles in films. And this was big, you know, he kind of running the show as a guy who's a very successful self-made businessman, but does not have a college degree, and his son's off to college, and he catches his wife cheating on him. In one of the great scenes, like in a true Rodney Dangerfield, I don't get no respect scenario, he is walking through his mansion, and a guest at the party is standing in front of a piece of art and says to Rodney Dangerfield, "I was just admiring your wife's Klimt," referring to the painting. And Dangerfield, the character, replies, "You too?" Like, she's showing it to everybody. And it's just such, like, from that moment, you know that they got the comedy right in this movie. And it's a funny, kind of heartwarming father-son story underneath it all, which, as we know, is what really makes a great comedy.
Right.
That human component. And same true with Animal House. You're laughing your ass off, but you're loving these characters. And Rodney Dangerfield really nails that in this movie.
See, you're right, though. I was a little unsure about Dangerfield with the father and son dynamic and giving you that heartfelt, twist to the plot, because I'm like, really? But it worked. It really worked.
It really does.
Yeah. So this movie has a nice cameo from Oingo Boingo. If you remember Thornton, who is Rodney's character, his dorm party, Oingo Boingo performs and has a cameo. I believe it was Dead Man's Party was the song that they did. So the front man for the band, Danny Elfman, actually wrote the score to the movie. And going along those lines in terms of the music, there's also a scene that features the song Twist and Shout, in which he performs in the movie, Rodney Dangerfield does. And I only mentioned that because this movie, Back to School, came out the same week in 1986 as Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And of course, that song Twist and Shout was also featured in a big way, toward the end of the movie during that parade. So I just found that interesting that you have these two movies launched at the same time and featuring the same song.
And I kind of kicked around the idea of including Ferris Bueller on the list, but that movie, of all things, is really about not going to school.
The exact opposite.
As you know, then Danny Elfman went on to an incredible career as sort of the definitive film composer in so many movies. So that is a really interesting piece of trivia.
Yeah. All right. So we are going to change gears a little bit in terms of genre, because we are talking next about a pretty heavy drama here from 1988. And it is based on the true story of a math teacher, Jaime Escalante, who taught at a high school in East LA. And that is the movie Stand and Deliver.
And I was gonna say, like, as you said, that changing gears, like, what an understatement. And this list is, goes from one extreme to the other. And as we were talking about before, high school's a very dramatic time. And so when things are funny, they're really, really funny. And when things are serious, they're really, really serious. And Stand and Deliver is an example of that. Edward James Olmos, it plays a high school teacher in East LA, and it's his story this is one of 3 films on the list that deal with this very sort of heavy teacher coming into a violent, unsettled classroom that's not performing and trying to turn things around for these kids. And so Edward James Olmos was nominated for an Oscar for this role, where he plays a math teacher in this largely Hispanic classroom that is rife with gang violence and drug issues, also emotional issues that obviously go hand in hand with all of this, performance issues and academically. So, it's his struggle and triumph, small triumphs. And it's one of those stand up and cheer movies.
Really, really poignant film. And, in terms of endorsing it, the real life teacher, Jaime Escalante himself, had said that the film was 90% true and 10% drama. So that's really a huge endorsement in terms of how the film stuck to the real story. You know, Edward James Olmos and Escalante actually discussed the dialogue in the film. Olmos consulted Jaime Escalante about what was said to make sure that what was being said in the movie reflected what actually happened in real life. Those two really became friends up until Escalante's death in 2010. And Edward James Olmos even led a drive to pay for Escalante's medical bills, which was then, you know, former students of the real math teacher, along with cast and crew, participated in that campaign.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, you know, to say that the story is 90% true, I mean, when you see these movies, you're sitting in the audience back in the day when we still went to movie theaters, and the first thing that comes up is based on a true story. I mean, it might be 5% of it might be based on a true story. So it's amazing that this was so accurate because it's so moving.
Right. And, you know, funny you mentioned that, because I had looked up that terminology and I had seen it discussed before. Apparently, and again, you know, I had just seen this and seen it discussed, but when a film says based on a true story, it's supposed to technically be 80% or more accurate. And when it says it's inspired by a true story, then it's a little bit more loosely based, and you can take your, you know, changes here and there. So yeah, you're right. And so we are moving on to the next movie. And, you know, again, 1 year later in 1989, another real life story that inspired this film, and that is Lean on Me.
And I think of if we're going with this sort of theme of hero teacher, struggling classroom, terrible neighbor, you know, poor community, struggling community, Lean on Me is my favorite of these films. Morgan Freeman stars again in the true story of the high school principal, Joe Clark, in Paterson, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a sort of infamous image of him like holding the bat in his hand, trying to get this school, which is failing on every level. It's losing its accreditation. He's dealing with a school board that is against change. He's doing radical things to try and get the kids up to passing scores. He's fighting parents. He's fighting the kids who are resisting him. He's fighting the school board. And, you know, it's a true testament to the acting talent of Morgan Freeman, because really the man just stands in front of a camera and you kind of stop and pay attention. He is magnificent.
And that voice, I mean, talk about the voice of authority.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a fantastic story. And wow, what a stand-up and cheer moment at the end. I mean, you really, you know, when the kids sort of join forces with him, with the principal to approve of his methods and, you know, fight against the outside forces that are trying to keep them down. I mean, it's hard to stay in your seat when you're watching that movie. It's great.
Correct. And just a casting note, and this I found interesting because normally there's a reason they can't make it happen due to logistics, due to safety and stuff. But the film was actually shot at Eastside High with actual teachers and students participating as extras. So that just, you know, added a little bit more of the genuine to it. And then, you know, Morgan Freeman, once again, I mean, he could be anything and do a great job.
As he's shown multiple times.
Yes, he's proven that. And Morgan Freeman's going to come up a little bit later on our list, so keep that in mind. We are staying in the same year, 1989, and this movie has a little bit of a different angle to it. It is set at a fictional academy in Vermont, Welton Academy, and while it was released in 1989, the film itself was set in the autumn of 1959, and we are talking about Dead Poets Society.
What a fantastic movie. I mean, if you are watching this and you have kids that are high school age and are looking for a family night film, I mean, it's a heavy drama.
It is.
But I mean, it reminds me of some of those great novels, A Separate Peace.
Yes.
You read at that age and really impact you in a meaningful way. And this is a film like that. Robin Williams stars, and it's, I'm sure, his first serious role. I don't know that for sure, but I can't think of any movie that came
One
before that.
One of his first, definitely, yeah.
Yeah. And he plays a high school teacher at this boarding school where he's trying to teach the kids in a very unconventional way. And actually, I had a professor who did this in college too, which was a very cool, meaningful effect, which is he rips the introduction out of the textbook in the first class and kind of gets your notice as a kid, you know, with the teacher willing to destroy the book. But Peter Weir directs this film, and if you don't know his name, you certainly know his movies. He is, in my opinion, in anybody's opinion, it's not a very controversial statement to say that he is one of the greatest film directors of all time. He directed Witness, The Truman Show, Gallipoli, which is another fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. Even the Gerard Depardieu romance Green Card, which is another fun, great movie. Like, put that one on your list too. So, and I know you're gonna who was originally cast in the role, right? Of the role that Robin Williams played?
You know, no, I don't know that. You do? Who?
Liam Neeson was not considered. He was originally cast in the role. And when they changed directors, they changed actors for the role to Robin Williams.
They can do that? They've hired one and then just drop him because of a change of hands in the director?
You know, I think they can do whatever they want. I'm not sure how it costs money to do it, but yeah, so that's just a little interesting tidbit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And yeah, so Robin Williams plays the teacher, and Ethan Hawke, who's not the main boy, but this was a big role for him as one of the kids in the classroom. And it's just this incredibly touching story about a boy in the class played by Robert Sean Leonard, who is fighting the control of his father, who has a very specific path in mind for him, and the child does not want to walk that path. And it is a relatable, beautiful, in this case, tragic story. And, you know, just the real message ultimately is this impact that Robin Williams' character has on this class of boys and the inspiration that he provides for them. And that sometimes it's difficult within a very strict framework or educational paradigm, you know, in a different way than Lean on Me or Stand and Deliver, but with that same sense of restraint or inability to inspire that, you know, you'd hope would happen in schools. So anyway, Dead Poets Society is a beautiful film.
And you were talking about how this could easily be, you know, one of those great novels. And in fact, you know, it felt that way. You were following these kids as they progressed. And I think, you know, you were talking about the genius in the directing with Peter Weir. And there's a lot of his methods that he used for this film that you can see resulted in one great movie. For instance, you know, we have talked about this before, that most films, due to scheduling, logistics, and cost, they are not shot in chronological order. But this film was, because Peter Weir wanted to show the real progression of the relationship between the teacher and the students, and other ways that he kind of made sure that this cast gelled. And you really felt that with the students. You felt that there was something there that was connecting them. He wanted the young cast to stay in character during production. So one of the rules was they were not allowed to use modern slang in their conversations, even offset, because again, this film was set in 1959. And also, another way to help them bond was he required that the kids room together during production. So, you know, I mean, little tricks in there of a great director.
That's awesome. Yeah, it all paid off in the end, because that's really an incredible film.
And of course, from the movie, it is one of the top 100 movie quotes of all time, according to the American Film Institute.
Let me stand on my chair.
Okay, I was going to say, Debbie, yes. I knew that you were going to be ready for this. Oh, my God.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Okay, I had that, and I also had the other one.
Oh, shit, did I say the wrong one? What's the quote?
Carpe diem, seize the day. Or did I have the wrong movie?
That's right. Okay. Well, I got on a table for nothing.
But that was good. That was a really good interpretation of that scene. So kudos to you. But I was actually referring to Carpe Diem, seize the day, make your lives extraordinary, which is still having an impact. You are still hearing it in commencement speeches around the country to this day. So before we move on to the next film, because it actually has a connection, for Dead Poets Society, did you know that Matt Damon, he had revealed later in an interview that he and his good friend Ben Affleck actually auditioned for roles in this movie, and just judging by the timeline, I would think that they had auditioned for, you know, the roles of the students. But of course, we know that they did not make it. They were turned down. So what do they do about, 7-8 years later? They make their own movie. And that is the next movie we're gonna take up, 1997's Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Damon, both of them have been acting since they were kids. And Good Will Hunting is their first successful screenplay. And I've heard so many stories about Good Will Hunting, because when they won the Academy Award, the two of them, for Best Original Screenplay for this film. And what a Cinderella story. Everyone loved it. They brought their mothers to the Oscars as their dates. They, were these charming, adorable guys from best friends from Boston. Everyone was cheering for them. And I have read that originally Good Will Hunting was supposed to be like a spy thriller.
Yes.
Matt Damon's character discovers this math formula, but it's somehow there's some nefarious intrigue going on. They simplified the screenplay to just be the story of this damaged guy who's a math genius working as a janitor at a college, and this coming of age story, which was beautiful. And Robin Williams, there's your link you were bringing up, which would have been interesting if Matt Damon had been cast in Dead Poets Society, because it would have been there, 10 years later.
Correct.
And while Robin Williams doesn't play a teacher, he plays the therapist, helping Matt Damon's character overcome these demons of his childhood abuse.
Right.
So, it's a moving story. It's brilliantly acted all around. Robin Williams won the Academy Award.
He did, for Best Supporting Actor.
And I think that's another little link there too, because a lot of people felt that Robin Williams was not properly recognized for his performance in Dead Poets Society.
Correct.
We'll see how these, the Academy Awards, there's a lot of, gathering of chips as you go on through your career. And if you were slighted, that
yes,
play in later nominations. I mean, this is obviously an elite group of actors we're discussing, but yeah.
Well, we've mentioned several incidents on this podcast before about that happening. So, you mentioned that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon had been friends for a long time, and, they had been working on scripts for a long time. This script for Good Will Hunting actually started as part of a final assignment for a playwriting class at Harvard by Matt Damon. And so you're talking about some of the twists and turns that the script took. And when Damon and Affleck were writing the script, they had Robert De Niro or Morgan Freeman in mind as Dr. Sean McGuire, the role that eventually went to Robin Williams. And Robin Williams got hold of the script through, for some reason, Francis Ford Coppola. And as he was reading the script, reportedly he turns to Coppola and said, "Who are these guys?" Referring to Affleck and Damon, because he had no idea who they were. And what really sold the studio itself on the script was the fact, well, actually two things coming together. Robin Williams said yes to being in the movie, and also right around that time, Matt Damon was hired as the lead for The Rainmaker, the John Grisham movie. Mm-hmm. So that convinced the studio as to Matt Damon's bankability as a movie star.
Interesting. That really, for two, kind of unknowns to make that leap is a challenge in that industry for sure. And then, but to get that project, a lot of planets had to align for them, and we're all very lucky that they did.
Yeah, to get the movie made and winning that Oscar, I know. Ben Affleck was the youngest person to win a screenplay Oscar at 25. He was 25. Matt Damon was 27. So quite an achievement for those two.
Yeah, amazing.
All right, so we are moving on to a movie from 1995. And again, this is one of those heavies when we're talking about a real life story about turning a school around, and that is Dangerous Minds. And this is based on the autobiography of a retired Marine, and her name was Luann Johnson, and who is, of course, played by Michelle Pfeiffer in the movie.
Yeah, Dangerous Minds, it's, that same scenario we've discussed with Lean on Me and Stand and Deliver. It is the story, the memoir adapted for screen of Luann Johnson, as you said, a retired Marine who comes into this predominantly African-American classroom, and as a woman and as a white woman has to not only teach these kids who have very little interest in being taught, but also garner their respect, which is as big of a challenge. She's a badass though, and you can see like the pain on my face because Michelle Pfeiffer, God love her, she is incredibly talented. She was too beautiful to play this part, in my opinion. We always joke, I think her looks have hurt him as an actor. We talk about like Rob Lowe or somebody, they're so talented that their looks may have hurt them as an actor.
Yeah.
And I think that Michelle Pfeiffer, her looks may have hurt her in this role. She toughs it up. She puts on the leather jacket. She does a great job. She's a very, very talented actress. There's no question. It's just a little hard to immerse yourself in that world with her in that role. I think that, there were other actresses who might have, the movie might have been better served with a little bit of a more of a gritty less kind of a Princess Grace look than.
Sure. Yes.
She handles the role fine. She does a great job. She, same story. She gets attached to the kids, trying to turn them around, trying to get them out of gangs. There's some tragedy. There's some triumph. It's a great movie. It really is.
You know, we usually do our research in terms of finding out who is considered first for these roles, but amazingly enough, I wasn't able to find any such juicy gossip, you know, behind the scenes in terms of the casting for this movie. What I did find was during production, Michelle Pfeiffer was actually pregnant. She was with child. And so if you see that movie again, you will notice the bulky sweaters, the longer skirts, and as she got bigger, she was often shot carrying something even bigger in front of her. So, so FYI.
And there's so many times in movies and television where you don't notice that the actress is pregnant. And Elaine famously in one season of Seinfeld.
I did not know that until recently. Yeah. My goodness.
Brought that kind of long blazer into fashion. Really, it was a tactic to cover up her stomach. And the one I absolutely never knew was Claire Dunphy on Modern Family in the first, I think it was the first season, but it may have been the second, was pregnant with twins. And
whoa.
You never notice it. It's amazing.
No, wow.
You see it, yeah. But anyway, so I digress.
Oh, wow. Well, the magic of the movies, the magic of the camera. How about that?
Yeah.
All right. So talk about just switching genres completely. This film is hard to categorize in terms of what kind of movie it is. It has comedy, it has drama, it has, you know, a little bit of suspense, and that is 1999's Election. And, you know, I was glad to see this on your list, Deb, because I love this movie. It's a great movie.
It is a great movie. It is dark. It is, Matthew Broderick stars as a sort of a high school teacher with a little bit of a dark cloud, you know, just not, you know, kind of a good guy who likes his job, but he's got, you know,
there's a chip on his shoulder somewhere. Yeah.
The person who brings that chip to the front of his shoulder, if that's even a metaphor, is Reese Witherspoon's character. She plays an overly ambitious high school student running for student council. And the comedy of the film becomes Matthew Broderick's obsession with bringing her down, having her lose. She is an overachiever, that girl you love to hate in high school, Miss Perfect, who is doing some, you know, bad stuff to get elected. She's taking other candidates' posters down and sabotaging campaigns.
I did not like her character.
Her campaign, I mean, it's, yeah, it's just a very, very dark comedy. And then Matthew Broderick has some additional issues in his character has some additional issues in his personal life going on that all kind of contribute to this shitstorm of a, you know, just bad stuff happening.
It was almost uncomfortably funny, like you were actually a witness to this chain of events that take place in the movie. And the image that really sticks with me from that movie is Matthew Broderick's look at the end with the, you know, the swollen eyelid, and that just is a metaphor for you know, how his life had turned out.
Yeah, and it's one of those, I mean, you really have to like that genre of black comedy because it is a little bit of an almost like anxiety producing comedy where you're like, oh my God, like what else could go wrong? And there is always invariably something else.
Right. And you know, those are the kinds of movies that I actually enjoy, something that keeps you on edge while you're watching it, but at the same time, it has a little bit of a comedic relief to get you by. So one thing that I found interesting about this movie is that it was based on a novel by Tom Perrotta which was inspired by a couple of real-life events. The first being Ross Perot's third-party candidacy as President of the United States in 1992. And also, it might appear completely unrelated, but if you've seen this movie or if you're going to watch this movie, it's going to make sense. The other basis was an incident at a high school in Wisconsin in which a pregnant student was received the most votes as homecoming queen, but a different winner was announced after the staff burned the ballots to cover it up. So, if you like that kind of intrigue, you really will enjoy this movie. And another thing to note, cast-wise, we've talked about Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon, but this was the debut of Chris Klein of American Pie fame. And Chris Klein is from Omaha, and the director Alexander Payne is also from Omaha. And Chris Klein was actually discovered while Alexander Payne was scouting for a location for a high school in Omaha. And Chris happened to be a high school student at one of the high schools, and so that's what happened there.
Very lucky for Chris Klein. Turned into a good career for him.
Oh my goodness, no kidding. All right, so our next movie, we're going to jump to 2004.
Oh,
yes.
Before you jump there, though, this is where I want to squeeze in my other movie, because when we're talking Black comedy, there really is no better than Heathers, starring Christian Slater. And I can't believe we left it off the list.
You forgot about that.
It is, in my opinion, not only is it about high school, but in my opinion, it is the definitive Black comedy. It's the funniest Black comedy and the best Black comedy I've ever seen personally. It's Winona Ryder and Christian Slater as high school students battling the three Heathers, three classmates all named Heather, deciding to murder them to bring down this evil empire of girls that rule their class. And it's hilarious and intelligent and just a fantastic movie overall. So if Election is up your alley, Heathers will absolutely be up your alley as well.
See, this list was really tough to put together because there's so many good ones. And I remember Heathers, and I remember I was in college at the time, and it seemed to be everybody's favorite movie. Wherever you turn, they talk about Heathers. Have you seen Heathers? Have you, that kind of thing. So you're right about that, and it certainly deserves a special mention.
Yeah, so
yes, and good recommendation too. Yeah, especially if you like Election, you will definitely love Heathers. Yeah. All right, so we're going to move to 2004, and we are talking a comedy, and that is Mean Girls. It was written by Tina Fey, based on Rosalind Wiseman's Queen Bees and Wannabes.
Yes, and this would be one of those inspired by, as opposed to based on.
Yes.
Stories. Mean Girls stars Lindsay Lohan in right at the peak. Well, no one at the time thought it was the peak of her career. They thought it was the ascending slope, but
it kind of
was. Yeah. She plays the new girl in a high school class that's ruled by, again, the sort of bully, beautiful, rich girls, mean girls, who are ruled by Regina. And that is a fantastic role played by Rachel McAdams, who you just never associate with. She's so likable. When you think of Rachel McAdams, you think of the roles she's played. It's always so heartwarming, and you're always kind of cheering for her. So she does a great job as Regina George, the evil bully of the school.
Right.
Tina Fey recruits her SNL inner circle, including Amy Poehler and Anna Gasteyer and Tim Meadows, to play the grown-ups at the parents and teachers at the school.
Right.
And it's just Lindsay Lohan's character has been living with her zoologist parents in the out in the wilderness, and comes to her first structured school situation and applies kind of the law of the jungle to her survival. And so it's a very clever film, and very funny and very entertaining.
It really was. And, you know, that just shows off the brilliance of Tina Fey
Yeah.
as a writer. This was actually her film debut as a screenwriter. And, you know, it's really interesting to learn how thorough she is when it comes to writing the script. She named the characters after her real life friends, you know, whether they correspond to the character of the movie people, we don't know that. But she actually had envisioned backstories for all of the characters in her mind, not on script. So if any of the cast had questions about their characters, she had them ready to go. So she was really very thorough that way. And you mentioned Tim Meadows, who was in the cast, and he had broken his hand. Did you hear about this? He broke his hand prior to the start of production. And so that's where you get the storyline about Mr. Duvall having carpal tunnel. It was added to the script to fit that, you know, he had broken his hand. So.
Okay. That's a good little bit of trivia.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, this was a great movie, really fun movie. It has a really solid, loyal following. And, you know, the Broadway version of Mean Girls debuted in 2018. So that goes to show about how this story remains relevant to this day. Okay, so we are ending with our list with two back-to-back movies, one from 2000 and one from 2007. And we are doing this because we're talking about back-to-back Denzel Washington, and what could be better than that? So our first movie we're going to talk about is from the year 2000, and that is Remember the Titans.
Remember the Titans is such a great movie. If you're looking for a family film, again, this is one of those stand up and cheer, great moments. It's rich. The characters are layered. There's, you know, it's the true story of the desegregation of T.C. Williams High School in Alexandria, Virginia in 1971. So Denzel Washington is coaching the team and trying to facilitate the desegregation of the team. And they are a fantastic football team. The new African-American players are contributing to the team, and they're becoming this, they're champions, this team. And there becomes this whole drama of racial play within the parent community, within the school board, within the students. And it's just how this amazing coach resolves this situation. And you know, this team is a champion for both, you know, playing the game of football, but also they're sort of a blueprint for the successful desegregation of the school. And very early in, you know, the era of desegregation, 1971, it was probably 6 years after the Civil Rights Act. So, you know, in a fairly southern Alexandria, I wouldn't really don't consider it a southern town, but it's still in the south.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I mean, what a role for Denzel Washington, because, you know, talk about the actor to kind of hold it all together and play that rock for the movie in terms of the motivational force behind it. I mean, he really was unforgettable in this role.
In many ways, it's the perfect film for him because he won the Academy Award for Training Day, which is kind of a similar man in control, running the show, teaching the ropes. This film, in my opinion, is so next level for him in terms of acting, in terms of message. You can really feel the love of this project in his acting. The character's dedication and commitment and the performance is Oscar worthy, in my opinion, completely.
And I thought too, with this role in particular with Denzel, just the subtlety in it, because there are movies of Denzel's that it is so Denzel, he's right in your face. This one was a little bit more nuanced, and it was more effective for this type of movie.
Yeah, I agree. I thought he did a brilliant job. And you may have noticed the appearance of a young actor who would go on to make our hearts pound a bit. Ryan Gosling is in this movie.
Oh, that's right. You're right. You're right. Yes. Well, see, when I saw that movie, Gosling wasn't even on the radar yet. But you're right. He is in this movie. Okay. So our next film, another Denzel film, this one came out in 2007, and it is also based on an actual real life event, and that is The Great Debaters. This is based apparently on a 1997 article that appeared in American Legacy publication about the Wiley College debate team in the 1930s.
Correct. And it was an African-American college in the South. And Denzel Washington, again, plays the mentor teacher for the debate team as they drive through the South debating different colleges. This is a fantastic movie. Again, Denzel Washington is perfect in the role.
Yes.
He's got his group of debaters, and they're obviously the racial strife they encounter and I mean, I just got goosebumps because there's no better way to combat racism than with intelligent debate.
Yes.
So the pairing of these two concepts is so fantastic. And there is an incredibly powerful and disturbing scene when the group happens upon a lynching, and that has already happened. And to this day, the image is kind of burned in my brain. It's very disturbing. And the kids' response, who, despite the fact that they're not little kids, but it's a world that kind of violence they hadn't been exposed to. And it's such a moving scene. Denzel Washington kind of trying to explain the unexplainable to these kids is so moving and horrible and amazing. It's just really worth seeing. The one thing I would say that really detracts from this film for me is that they fictionalize the end of the film and have the debate team debating Harvard College. Why? That's not what happened in real life. I think in real life they debated USC, which...
Right, it wasn't completely a different school, yes.
Also, but a tremendous triumph for this little tiny Southern all-black college to debate this huge, California school is a big achievement. But they really, I guess, wanted to impress people and say, in the movie, they debate Harvard and beat them.
Right. I understand that this movie, The Great Debaters, is only one of a couple movies to be allowed to film on the Harvard campus. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it at all, like a chicken or the egg thing. But, that's what was distinctive about this. And I don't know if they changed the script because they heard that Harvard was on board or what. But you're right. I mean, that was when I saw that it wasn't even the actual team.
Yeah, so it's okay. I mean, it detracts from the movie only if you know the story. So
true.
Fantastic story. The vast majority of it is a true story, and the acting's incredible. And again, it's a stand-up and cheer movie. It's a root for the underdog movie, and those are always my favorite kind. And the payoff is fantastic. So with that little discrepancy aside, it's a very worthwhile movie, and it's a wonderful film with so many. You're learning and you're being entertained at the same time.
Yes, I mean, the script was unbelievable. And, it helped, too, that there was a little bit more star power in this movie. Forrest Whitaker was in it, and Oprah Winfrey was a producer for the movie. So, yes, and it's also important to note that right around the time this film was released, I believe it was December 2007, Denzel Washington announce a $1 million donation to Wiley College to reestablish its debate team. So that was a really
awesome.
nice, ending to
Denzel.
that. Oh yeah, Denzel.
It's like as if he couldn't be more, perfect. Like he raised the bar again.
You mentioned that there was a recent incident in LA in which he, at the height of the protest going on around the country, he actually intervened. There was a situation with I believe it was a mentally challenged man on a sidewalk, and the police were surrounding him and just kind of trying to assess the situation. And Denzel jumped right in the middle of that and acted as a go-between between the officers and the young man and kind of diffused the situation. That's Denzel.
He's my hero. I love him.
I know, he's great. Okay, so there you have it. That is our must-see list of back-to-school movies, school-related movies, school-centric movies. And so, Deb, for a complimentary sweet treat, we are presenting you with the perfect after-school pick-me-up. You're going to need one of these, a scoop.
I have one.
Hey, I would think everyone would have one. And that is, we are going to make a classic milkshake for you. So, really simple. A couple scoops of ice cream, 2 parts ice cream to 1 part milk. And if you really want to be fancy about it, you're going to also make your own whipped cream at home.
I'm telling you, I'm not a big fan of all this jazzing up of the milkshakes. I don't like all the cookies and the caramel and all this stuff that people
a whole pizza on top.
Yeah. The hamburger with the milkshake.
Yes.
Not that exists. I don't know why I'm even saying that, but
oh, I've seen them.
I'm a milkshake purist. I love just the milk and the ice cream and the chocolate sauce, or the black and white milkshake, which is vanilla ice cream and the chocolate sauce. The homemade whipped cream sounds great. So that's
and easy perfect. Too. Yes, it takes it to another level, and it's so easy to make. So that is what we're going to have for you. And of course, you can find that recipe on gazellemagazine.com. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel by clicking on the Gazelle logo on the screen. You'll be among the first to know when a new episode of the Sir Podcast goes live. So thank you for joining us, Debbie. We will see you again next week.
Excellent. Thanks, Trish.
See ya.